Hello students. I wanted to spend a few minutes here and show you the epoxy process. I know I've done that on other projects, but wanted to do that kind of as one of the finishing videos for the nightstand. So let me load up here and get us going. You may or may not remember about this process. This is dried overnight and it turned out good. It's rock hard. That's what we want. If you don't do it right and it's soft, when you go to sand it, it's a mess. It'll fill up your sander. I use my surface sander to sand mine to save a lot of time, and it'll ruin that belt, and that belt's probably a good $80. Okay, so we want it to be rock hard, so you got to get your process down right. So I use these graduated cups. Okay, and you start out calculating kind of as you do more of these, you'll get an idea, but this represents about 2 ounces of epoxy. I think I made 3 just to, it's better to have too much and it overfilled than not enough. And I put 3 in here and 2 in there. So to simplify things, I didn't mix them all separately. I mixed them all together, and then I divided them up for the colors. I use easy cast resin. There's a lot of different resins out there. This is low odor, so I thought it was more appropriate for high school setting. I may experiment with others in the future. I bought it last year. As you can see, it's a 2-part system, and this used to be clear as well, and it's yellowed with time, all right? Which may change your color a little bit, but it still works. It's not like it has gone bad in a year. It just changed color on me. When I mixed them together, it lightens it, but yeah, it's working fine. I ruined a lot of projects early on, right, where it wouldn't harden, so I'd put more hardener in to no avail. So I called the company and they told me this process. When you mix part A and B, they have to be exactly equal amounts, whatever you're mixing, and they don't recommend you go over 6 ounces at a time, right? So 3 and 3. Well, I went 4 and 4 for this one just to make sure I had enough, and that was more than enough. But you might keep that in mind. If you go more than 6 ounces total, it's getting risky, okay? The deal is they have to be exactly equal. So these graduated cups help a bunch to make sure as you're doing it, you're pouring in exactly equal amounts. And then the second step is you're going to pour part A, whichever you want to call A, into part B. And then you've got to use some type of a stick or something to get all of A out. Every drop you can get out, and it takes patience, and you don't want it running on the outside of the cup so you can't drip, or they're not equal amounts anymore, right? So as precisely as you can, every drop out of here into the other cup. Then that cup's trash. You're going to mix them as thoroughly as possible for 2 minutes, okay? So you'll want a timer on. So I go back and forth at a 90, back and forth, and I stir the edges, and I rub the edge with the stir stick. I rub the bottom with the stir stick. I go round and around. You don't have to go real fast because you're probably introducing bubbles, right? And usually I've had luck with the bubbles coming to the top anyway. You can see this is pretty rough with bubbles, but they sand out, and down below there aren't bubbles. So you can use a heat gun if you're afraid of the bubbles not coming to the surface, and that will bring it to the surface. We've got glitter. I didn't choose to do any glitter or metal flake. That's another option. Guys, the colors. This kind of epoxy, easy cast, is you can use any acrylic colors. Sky's the limit. If it's acrylic, it'll work. All right, and those are opaque. Well, I've also bought online translucent colors where you can see through them, okay? So the white's opaque, the yellow's opaque, and the red is translucent. Okay, I kind of like the look of both of them, and I'll show you that. But anyway, we're stirring for 2 minutes. When I've got that done, what I did, I told you I mixed 8 ounces, right? So I poured 2 ounces into the white cup. I poured 3 ounces into the red cup, and then I used this cup for the yellow, right? So it took me 5 cups to do what you're looking at here. 2 to mix, right? And then here's the deal. When you have, I skipped a step, sorry. When you've mixed it for 2 minutes, after you pour part A into part B and you stirred for 2 minutes, then you're gonna get a new cup. That's why I have another clear cup over here. You're gonna pour it into the next cup, right? And every bit, every ounce, every drop out of there, right, of part A and B, every one out of there, every drop into the new cup. Throw that stick away, throw that cup away, it's now trash. New cup, new stick, you're stirring for a minute. Same thing, thoroughly stirring, scraping the edge of the side of the cup so you get all of that stirred, going back and forth, and then at a 90 back and forth, scraping the bottom. I even like to stir it up a little bit, you know, to make sure the top layer is getting mixed with the bottom layer. So after a minute's done, that's when I poured 2 ounces into the white, 3 into the red, and 3 into the yellow, okay? Then you put in your color. On the color, you want to put no more than 10% of the color to the volume of the epoxy, okay? They say if you go over 10%, it may not harden. So under 10%. The translucent color is concentrated. So a couple drops might do you, depending on how much epoxy, but you can always add more. You know, if you only added a couple drops to 3 ounces, it may look pink. So I added some more until I got to the red color that I wanted. So as far as adding your acrylic color, no more than 10% of the volume of the epoxy. Then you're stirring it. I stirred it another minute to get it thoroughly stirred, the color in there thoroughly stirred, and then you're ready to do your pours. Notice I've got tape on there. Okay, if you don't have tape, it just runs into each other, right? So you got to get a boundary of tape, and you got to be very thorough about putting it down. I've had students that haven't taped very well, and the epoxy ran right off of it, and it glued their project to whatever table we were setting it on, right? So it was a dang mess. So you want to, what I do is I take the tape, okay? And if this were what I'm going to tape around, I go up to it. The back part is pressed down thoroughly. The front half is then folded back. Then the next piece, you would do the same right over that piece of tape, right? The back part is sealed down the corner, then lift it up. That way you've got a corner that is tight. The epoxy can't run out of it, and you do that all the way around. So the inside is lifted up, the back half is pushed down very thoroughly, okay? And then you're pouring your epoxy. Overfill it a little bit. You can see some red got in here. That's because my test board here, if you can look through the translucent, it had a hole there, and it ran underneath the board and came up in the yellow. This is my practice one. I'm gonna show you the one that I did here in a second, our nightstand prototype. So you gotta leave it overnight. It will harden, hopefully. If it doesn't, start over. And if it does, next step is taking off all the tape. And sometimes it's a battle, especially if the epoxy ran over the tape. You know, you can't hardly get it out. So you may have to use a scraper. We need to get as much of the tape off as possible so we don't gum up our sanders, all right? And then, like I said, I use the surface sander to start with until I get it down to the level of the wood, and it makes it look like an inlay, but it's gonna be really rough, okay? Oh, another thing you're gonna wanna do before you leave it overnight, you wanna level it. I've had it set on unlevel tables before, and it all runs to one side, and then it's not full anymore on the other. So you gotta be pretty close to level, okay? However you wanna do that. If it's not level, I put a couple sticks on this table because underneath, because it was close. You may, you know, fold up pieces of paper, whatever, stick it under the corners until you get it level one direction and then the other direction. Okay, once it's level, you let it set overnight. Well, I did this same thing on the prototype. Here it is, came out really good. I am so happy. It was nice and hard, so it sanded clean, didn't gum up my sanding belt. You can see it's not shiny yet. I don't have my finish on it. I haven't buffed it with steel wool. I still need to hit it with 220. I believe my belt over there was 180. Okay, so I still need to sand the whole thing with 220, then steel wool to polish it to get it to look this shiny. Okay, so that's the process. Now, I wanted to also talk about putting the top on. I haven't showed you that yet, so I'm going to bring it over here. It's getting heavier with all the pieces on it. Either that or I'm getting older. Maybe it's both. Okay. So, to seal the top to the project, as you can see, I used Kreg screws. About every 4 inches through my